Tonight, Oscar Pistorius is fit to stand trial.
Mr. Pistorius did not suffer from a mental defect or mental illness at the time of the commission of the offence.
The court hears from the surgeon who amputated Oscar Pistorius's legs.
His ability to turn around is severely impaired by his lack of balance and the instability of his stumps.
Hello from the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. The athlete returned to the court here in Pretoria today after a month of tests in a psychiatric institution. The world was waiting to hear if he was mentally fit to continue being tried for the murder of his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp. In the end, both the defence and the prosecution agreed he was, and the case continued with defence witnesses. These witnesses included the surgeon who amputated the athlete's legs when he was just 11 months old. Ashish Joshi has been following today's proceedings.
Oscar Pistorius returned to court after more than a month's absence.
I'm feeling Oscar.
The double amputee on trial for murdering his girlfriend has been undergoing a psychiatric evaluation, tests that could determine his fate. Proceedings were halted because the judge wanted to know if the Paralympian is mentally fit to stand trial and to learn more about his state of mind the night he pulled the trigger on Reeva Steenkamp. The findings of the report conducted by a court-appointed panel of clinicians could have had a major impact on the trial, whether it continued at all or later in mitigation if the runner is found guilty. Both prosecution and defence teams were given the weekend to pore over some of the report's key findings.
The important portion of that particular report in terms of a finding is contained at page 31.
Yes.
Paragraph 6.1 and 6.2. 6.1. Mr. Pistorius did not suffer from a mental defect or mental illness at the time of the commission of the offence that would have rendered him criminally not responsible for the offences charged. 6.2. Mr. Pistorius was capable of appreciating the wrongfulness of his act and of acting in accordance with an appreciation of the wrongfulness of his act. My lady, in terms of the act and the court order, the panel submitted their reports, my lady. It's then, in my understanding of the procedure and the process to be followed, it's then up to the state and the defence to indicate to the court if it's accepted by us,
yes,
and
yes,
if we would want witnesses to testify on it. We had a quick discussion this morning, my lady. If the court will allow us, as far as the findings are concerned, I think we both accept the finding of the panel. There may be submissions in this regard at a stage later, if we would want the court to call any of those witnesses, or if we would want to cross-examine the witnesses. But for now, my lady, to enable the court to proceed as far as the findings of both reports are concerned, it's accepted by the state, the findings.
Oscar Pistorius' lawyer, Barry Rue, has asked for some more time to study the report, but in general, he accepts the findings.
You also got this when? This
yes,
morning?
No, we received it over the weekend, my lady.
Oh, right. Okay.
But we need just to carefully go through it.
Yes. I understand it, but what about
and consult on it and just make sure that we're responsible in our approach.
Yes, no, I understand that.
But it's correct, but the findings itself, these 678 findings, my lady, that's not in dispute.
Okay, so nothing is in contention?
So, with all parties accepting Oscar Pistorius did not suffer from any mental illness, the trial resumed with the calling of the first witness.
Gerald Alexander Versfeld.
Dr. Gerald Versfeld is the orthopedic surgeon who amputated Oscar Pistorius' legs when he was just 11 months old. He, according to the defence, would have an intimate understanding of the runner's disability and how it affected his mobility. Dr. Versfeld asked to remain anonymous during his testimony.
When walking or standing on his stumps without holding onto something, Oscar Pistorius finds himself in a situation that he is in danger of falling. He can walk for short distances without holding on, but he needs his hands and arm movements to balance himself. And has very limited means of rectifying the situation should he start falling. That is because he can only do very small strides, and he has to put down that stump in a very particular way. Whether standing or walking, he has to place the left stump in exactly the right position, or the soft tissues click out of place and cause him severe pain. He falls often because of this. His ability to turn around is severely impaired by his lack of balance and the instability of his stumps. On his stumps in a dangerous situation, his ability of fleeing is severely impaired, and his ability to ward off danger is severely impaired. Conclusion. On his stumps, Oscar Pistorius has serious difficulty walking or standing without support.
Dr. Westphal's evidence portrayed Oscar Pistorius on his stumps as vulnerable, easily unbalanced and limited in movement, stressing the runner would be in great pain for any continued time walking on his stumps. But the athlete in earlier testimony claimed he returned to his bedroom to put on his prosthetic limbs before returning to batter down the toilet door, apparently moving quickly and navigating around obstacles even though it was pitch black. For Hetty Nell, the two accounts don't seem to add up.
Now, on this particular night, and I'm just in summary, broad strokes, Mr. Pistorius with a gun in hand, pointed forward, walked from his room to the bathroom. He never fell. That's possible to do.
Yes.
He then turned into the bathroom on the tiles, and he looked what was going on in the bathroom and observed certain things. That's possible.
Yes.
Because that happened, yeah. Then he fired 4 shots with a 9mm pistol on his stumps.
Yes.
How would that affect him if he fires a shot on his stumps?
He would have severe difficulty depending on how he's firing. But yes, it's possible.
You said he will have severe difficulty. Yes, it's possible. He will have severe difficulty. Why?
Well, it depends how he's firing.
Okay, let's deal with it.
And
carry on.
And secondly, there would be a recoil problem from the firing.
So, what would the recoil problem be?
It could knock him off his stumps.
The integrity of the police investigation came under scrutiny when it was discovered a piece of evidence was now missing. Barry Rue had asked for an electrical extension cord from Oscar Pistorius' bedroom, but the police say they don't have it.
Where is that cord? Because we need that cord. The Captain van Aert then came back and said, well, I hear what you say, and that's what the letter's saying. We don't have the cord.
It's important because the athlete said he had woken on the night of the killing to move the fan in his room, and that was when he had heard what he thought was an intruder. Hetty Nell accused Oscar Pistorius of lying, saying the fan could not have reached where the runner claimed. The defence wants the cable to prove Oscar Pistorius' version of events that night is truthful.
But with utmost respect, if I may refer to the short answers, I don't have it. The state, we don't have it. I know that Mr. Rue would refer to photographs, but, my lady, the court cannot order the state to make something available that I informed the state we never ceased. In my consultation with the investigator, we never seized the court, and we don't have it. So therefore, we cannot make it available.
Where is the inventory? Was there no inventory?
Of seized items, yes, my lady. It's not on that inventory.
It's not on that inventory.
Of seized items, my lady. No.
Yeah, it's very strange.
It might be, my lady.
Because, I mean, they locked the doors every day. it was under their control,
Indeed, my lady.
and it can't walk.
Lady, that's all true. And I'm not saying that I have an explanation for it. What I'm saying, my lady, is that the position that the state is in, or that the defense is putting the court in, is to order something. Which
Well,
I
I'm not
indicated-
about to order something. I can't even read this. But I'm very concerned. What could have happened to it?
Indeed, my lady.
Barry Roos sought to undermine the police case. With the missing evidence, he might have just made his point. Judge Masipa, clearly concerned, a potentially crucial clue that might help explain what happened on the night of the 14th of February, be allowed to simply disappear.
Defence continued with evidence from a sound and acoustics expert. Ivan Lynn asked for his face not to be shown as he discussed how far the sound of a scream could have carried on Valentine's night last year, the night Reeva Steenkamp was shot dead.
The perception of sound by human beings may depend on a large amount of variables. First, I'm dividing into 3 categories: sound source sound spectrum, source sound intensity, etc. Second part, sound transmission, dependent on direct path, reflected path, number and types of intermediate sound barriers, ground conditions, temperature, atmospheric pressures, etc. To be able to differentiate between a male and a female scream, one need to consider the following points. Point number 1. Is it correct to reliably assume that without exception, all male screams sound the same? Point number 2. Is it correct to reliably assume that without exception, all female screams sound the same? Next point. Is it correct to reliably assume that without exception, a female scream cannot sound like a male scream, or vice versa? Next point. While it is possible to differentiate human oral perception of a typical male and a typical female scream with or without visual correlations, we have found no reliable studies or evidence to support that assumptions stated in 5.6.1 to 5.6.3 above are indeed correct. And this refers to 3 points made correct previously.
What does that mean in simple terms?
That although typically one can differentiate a male and female scream, but one cannot say reliably, without exception, one can always say it's a male or female scream. The listeners may have heard a scream at 80 meters away, irrespective if the scream was from the toilet, the bathroom, or the balcony. However, at 177 meters away, if the scream was from the toilet, it is very unlikely that a listener can hear the scream, let alone interpret the sound source reliably. If the screams were from the bathroom, the listeners may have heard a scream and may possibly be able to interpret the sound under certain conditions.
Well, I'm joined now by psychologist Franco Visser and attorney Martin Hood to discuss today's developments. First of all, Franco, what's been happening in terms of Oscar Pistorius over this 30-day assessment?
Yes, Mr. Pistorius has undergone an intensive period of assessment, interviews and reassessment and re-interviews over the 30 days. He obviously has been exposed to psychological tests, interviews with occupational therapists, interviews with psychiatrists, and so forth. So it's been an intense period of questioning and re-examination over the 30-day period, up to a point where they would have been able to compile a report on him.
They came up with 2 reports, so we understand it. The defence and the prosecution agree. Was that why it was dealt with so briefly in court?
Well, there's
Martin?
3 possibilities. One is a joint report where they agree. The second would have been 2 separate reports where they would have agreed on certain things but disagreed on others. And the third would have been where there's no agreement, in which event there would have been a need for evidence. there was no evidence necessary today because all of the experts unanimously agreed on the finding that was he did not suffer from this generalized anxiety disorder. I think it was going to happen that they all did agree that, or they all would agree that there was no generalized anxiety disorder. And I also get the sense that there's a little bit of urgency now to wrap this up. Everyone wants to come to a conclusion, get the evidence in, let the judge go away and think about it. And the fact that there was no debate about this set of reports, the fact that we haven't seen the reports, I think shows that there's a need now just to get things over and done with and move on.
Now, there is a theory that this is damaging for the defence. They were the ones who introduced the generalised anxiety disorder because of their own psychiatrist taking to the witness box and saying this. Is it that damaging?
I've called this before and I'll say it again and again and again. I don't think the defence has presented a particularly coherent case. So this is just another nail in the coffin of their case as far as I'm concerned. Had the experts come back and said, yes, there is a problem here, yes, it does need to be addressed, and it is a factor that may have influenced the way that he behaves, it would be a different story entirely. But I think it was fairly clear from when Meryl Foster started giving her evidence that she was reaching a little bit to try and find something, because no one knew what a generalized anxiety disorder was. It's not a very common...
Yes. Meryl Foster, the psychiatrist for the defence.
Yes, she basically coined the term for the South African population of accuseds, so to speak. So, you know, the catchphrase now is, do you suffer from a generalized anxiety disorder or not? And I do think the extent of the focus that we saw this morning on the report and the brief reference made by the state to the report is actually indicative of you know,
a lack of merit
in it, but also, you know, they're sitting with a huge potential time bomb there, because this report, or these reports that were submitted to court this morning, has clear implications possibly for sentence mitigation or sentence aggravation when the time comes, if he's found guilty.
Franco, what about the fact that every other accused
yes.
is now going to come along and say, well, I've got generalized anxiety disorder, you can't convict me, I'm not responsible for my actions. So there was a huge amount of public interest in actually getting this right. And I think it sounds like they got it right, Franco.
So Franco, you mentioned that it may come up again in sentencing if we ever get to that stage in this trial. So let's leave this report for now. The trial carried on. We heard from Jerry Firstfelt, the surgeon who amputated Oscar Pistorius' legs. It was interesting that this in some ways played into the anxiety and vulnerability that the defence were talking about before, is his evidence about Oscar Pistorius and his vulnerability on his stumps.
It is interesting in terms of, you know, especially the last two witnesses that they called, or the last bunch of witnesses that they called, is the so-called empathy witnesses. That it seems that the defense is trying to gain some kind of empathy for their client, for Mr. Pistorius, you know, by way of what is given in testimony by these experts that were called. Dr. Foster testifying the generalized anxiety disorder, the orthopedist testifying about his vulnerabilities pertaining to his amputations.
But there's always a risk in that. And I listened to some of his testimony this morning, and I think he made the same mistake that the other experts for the defense have made, and that is that he went outside of his area of expertise. I heard him talking, for example, and it's a particular interest of mine, I heard him talking about the effects of gunshots on his balance. But then he conceded, but I don't know what it's like to fire a firearm. So why did he say that in the first place? And then he also testified about the fact that Pistorius would need a weapon to protect himself because he couldn't balance properly, etc., etc. The fact of the matter is, Pistorius managed to go down the passage, he managed to fire the firearm, he managed to come back and do a number of other things on his stumps. That's fact. It's not contested in any way. So the evidence of Dr. Versfeld, I think, in a way, was probably a little bit more damaging to the defense case than doing anything positive for the defense case.
The other thing that was interesting about it, I think, was the timing of his examination of Pistorius. Once again, we've heard him being examined after he gave evidence, this idea that the defensive is reactive rather than proactive.
And we mustn't forget that we've got footage of Pistorius himself saying, I don't feel that I'm disabled. So there we have Pistorius' own opinion. Before this happened, I'm not disabled, I'm like a normal person. Treat me like a normal person. Then we have him bringing along an expert who says, well, he's not very steady and there's all sorts of pain consequences and he shouldn't be able to do this because he's not on balance.
It was a total different picture this morning that was created by the defense experts.
Absolutely. And again, it just in my mind raises doubt as to the authenticity and the integrity of the defense case.
They have a few more witnesses to call, we understand, but it's going to wrap up fairly soon in terms of the defence case.
I think that there is such a desire to finalise this now, because I think the defence, if nothing else, realises that the more witnesses that they call, the weaker their case becomes. The witness who gave the sound expert, I don't see the relevance of that. He himself has said there's all sorts of variables that come in and make a positive determination as to whether it was Pistorius or somebody else who possible. It doesn't take the case any further, because I think we all accept that the premeditated murder charge is not going to stick. So we're dealing with murder or culpable homicide. And the relevance of shouting and screaming is not relevant to the murder charge, because they needed to prove premeditation, and in order to do that they needed to prove an argument. I don't think that they proved the argument, so it's now down to murder or culpable homicide. All the shouting becomes irrelevant.
Okay, well, both, thank you very much for now. And the evidence continues here, but the defence case is drawing to a close. Now, every night that we have a hearing here in court, there will be a special programme and a catch-up programme at the weekend. For now, though, goodbye from Pretoria.